Hey, welcome to Corkscrew's Lunch and Learn, The Colors of Spring. My name is Sally Stein, and I'm the Director of Public Programs here at Corkscrew. And I want to welcome you all to our program. We have Dr. Jerry Jackson here today to speak with us. He's the Professor Emeritus at Florida Gulf Coast University. Before we get started, we want to go over a few things. I'm sure you all have noticed that you are in listen-only mode. We will be able to take questions though if you use the chat function, which is at the bottom of your screen. It looks like that little icon right there. So at the end of the webinar, we will have a question period where we'll be able to talk to Jerry, and well, I'll talk to Jerry and ask some of the questions that you have posted in the chat box. If you are registered, if you're attending right now, you will be sent a recording of this webinar. It also will be available online on our website at corkscrew.audubon.org under Lunch and Learn. That will be in a few days. All right, without further ado, we'll go ahead and let Jerry get started.
Let's see, how do I get this started? I don't, okay, share screen. There we go. Colors of Spring, exploring the diversity and roles of color in birds. Well, when I thought about this title, I could only think of Corkscrew Sanctuary, and I was thinking mostly of flowers to begin with. And you all probably think of the beauty of spring is in the flowers, such as the marsh pink that we see at Corkscrew, that a pink flower that has a yellow star in the very center of it that is outlined in red, showing a really striking, beautiful star. And Nuttall's thistle that's blooming right now at Corkscrew, a thistle that some refer to as the bull thistle, but this is not the bull thistle. And you can tell that it's not the bull thistle because the base of the flower right here where the arrow is has these little lines on it that are actually spines. In the bull thistle, those spines stick out and are prickly and very, very noticeable. But in Nuttall's thistle, named after the botanist Thomas Nuttall, who also was an ornithologist, they remain tightly wrapped around the base of the flower. And this is the thistle that is blooming now along the boardwalk. But what I really want to talk about today is the colors of birds. At no time of year are the colors of bird feathers, skin, bill, legs, and eyes as diverse as they are right now. So bright, and the patterns and textures so diverse. Within species, we find greater diversity in colors, textures, and patterns as a result of the transition from winter plumage to breeding plumage, distinctive colors and patterns in chicks and fledglings and in non-breeding and breeding adult birds. My son, Jerry Jr., sent me this photograph that he took Sunday, this past Sunday. And it was so beautiful that I wanted to use it at the opening because we also have the cedar waxwing in South Florida in the wintertime, and we had a flock of them in our backyard. You rarely see one. You almost always see them in flocks, and they're almost always at berries, such as this one. But look at the texture of this bird's plumage. It looks so smooth, and it is. It's so smooth because of feathers called powder downs that it has mixed among all of the other feathers on its body. And those powder downs are continuously growing, and they're continuously breaking apart into a fine powder that coats all of the other feathers, giving it this soft, satiny appearance. Powder downs are found in many birds and are very special in herons and egrets, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Throughout this program, the photos that you see are going to be my own, except in a very few cases where I identify the photographer at the bottom of the photo. And where I use some terms like powder down, I put those at the lower right at the bottom in pink. identifying what they are so that you can take a second look at that so you can have an understanding of what that term is. Along our way, I'll try to answer the following questions about bird colors. Where do they come from? Well, the answer is they come from pigments in some cases, and in other cases, they come from the structure of the feather itself. The pigments are largely melanin, which can give us red, brown, yellow, and black. It's mostly a black pigment, and the color that you see depends on the arrangement of the molecules of that pigment and how many molecules are there. And a black bird, for example, has a high density of melanin. How do these colors vary with season, age, and sex? Tremendously. And they vary as a result of a need to identify members of the opposite sex, young from old, one species from another, for the bird, not for us. And some of the colors that they have that are used for communication are ones that we can't even see because bird vision is much greater over a broader spectrum than human vision. They can see in the ultraviolet range and we cannot. Why do they vary? They vary because of needs that are seasonal, such as courtship, breeding, dispersal of young, and their ability to get along in communities. The plumage of young birds is often a signal that says, hey, I'm a kid, leave me alone. And other birds do. What roles do these colors play in the lives of birds? All kinds of roles, from camouflage to identification to their ability to mix in with other species of birds sometimes. I'm going to be going through a series of different species of birds, and these are just a sampling. I'm using birds that are from Southwest Florida, ones that we can see readily, so that you can get an understanding of some of this variation. The double-crested cormorant is a bird that's very common here in open water areas, such as at Eagle Lakes Park. We rarely see them at Corkscrew, but occasionally do. Hatching year birds have a light-colored breast. It can be almost white at first, but then begins to develop black speckling, as you can see here. The face is orange, but not terribly bright, and it fades in color as you go out toward the tip of the bill. The middle picture here is of a late second or early third year bird, and it's brown in color rather than black. And its colors are a little bit more vibrant, and you can see in this bird that it has a turquoise colored eye. And then the adult over on the right, you can see that it has the double crest, something that many people have never seen because it only lasts for a little time during the breeding season. They have a tuft of feathers on each side of the head, and that's why it's called a double-crested cormorant. Its colors are richer and much more defined, and its plumage colors are very black sheen and very bright. The eye and skin colors in spring are truly beautiful. Even the second year birds begin to develop bright colors in that turquoise eye. And the adult eye is even a brighter turquoise. And note that the throat color of a double-crested cormorant in its breeding plumage is light blue, a bright blue. The anhinga is another bird that's related to cormorants. It's also related to pelicans in that it has a bare throat, among other things. It's a tropical bird that occurs here. The male is solid black outside of the breeding plumage. And note right here on the wing, you can see a brown color. Those are old feathers. The rest of the feathers, the flight feathers, have molted and are fresh. And the brown color is simply a result of the action of the sun on the black pigment, causing it to fade. It's bleached out by the sun. Here's a female. Notice that on both the male and the female, the neck and head is very smooth in a non-breeding bird. The throat is bare and pink, And the eye color you can't see, but in both of these birds, the eye color is a deep red in color. The feet can be black or yellow, and they become bright yellow during the breeding season. One in breeding plumage looks quite different. Here's the male again on the right, on the left, and notice that it has developed really long feathers on the head, some tan-colored feathers with little spots on them. All of the feathers are longer on the head during the breeding season, and it's got blue around the eye and also a red eye. And the female too has developed longer feathers on the head, little white plumes that stick out all around, and she has developed a black throat. Looking a little closer at the head, you can see that the changes that take place are gradual and they produce many variations. The first photo up here is of a male in breeding plumage, and no, a female in breeding plumage, and she's got a light blue with a red eye and a black throat. And here she is down here. This is a bird that was incubating out at Corkscrew on the 16th of December in 2016. Here is one that is, I don't know what her status was, but notice that the blue has changed to green. It's probably just after breeding. And she's still got the blue ring around the eye, on the eyelids, a red eye, green here. Could you ever imagine that an anhinga could be that colorful? And here is a female that is post-breeding, and she still has the long plumes. She's losing the black throat, and she's already lost the blue color around the eye. So you can see all of these combinations right now at places like Eagle Lakes or at Corkscrew when Corkscrew opens, if it happens to open soon. Molt in anhingas is very different from other birds. They molt all of their flight feathers at the same time, so that for a period of about 2.5 to 3 weeks, they are flightless, and their only mode of escaping is by swimming. So they stay close to water, and they can climb trees and will climb a tree that is sloping, much like a woodpecker might walk up a tree. And they will go out on a limb over the water so that if they need to escape, they can just drop into the water, and they do. Molt in anhingas is also different in that they can molt at any time of year, but usually the molting occurs just before nesting, but that too can occur at any time of year. So any month of the year, you might see a bird that was flightless like this one that was just growing in new flight feathers. Let's switch to a smaller bird, and one that's very common, the killdeer. It's a bird that showed up in South Florida in the 1950s and is now a relatively common breeding bird here. It's a bird that is found in open environments, and it has camouflaging so that it blends in. It also has something called counter shading, which is light color below, dark color above. So when seen from above, it blends in with the ground, and when seen from below, it blends in with the sky. The chicks have a very similar pattern, but only one band of black on the body. Behavior of a killdeer can result in a very different appearance, showing a disruptive function. These black bands disrupt the outline of the bird, separating the head from the rest of the body. And when they have to stick their head up in order to get a better look over the grass or something, that band expands, making the separation even greater. And these two photos I took just seconds apart as this bird was stretching to see what I was doing. Yet a different color pattern, color and pattern comes into play with the killdeer's ungulate display. This is called the ungulate display because a bird on a nest will sit tight as an ungulate, like a deer or a cow or a horse or some other animal approaches the nest, and then all of a sudden they come into this display and begin a trill, and the display causes the animal to jump away at the last minute. Usually it's an animal that is walking toward it, and it keeps the bird or the animal from stepping on it. Note that these two wing feathers, this one here and this one here, always stick up like that in the ungulate display. The color is reddish, it's a rusty color. And there are two spots of white, one here and one here when the bird has his head down and his bill down. And it looks almost like an open mouth. And if you look at the face of a fox, it is somewhat similar to this. So the animal sees all of a sudden this motion and what it might initially think is a fox, and it jumps back. Another ploy with more color is used to distract other potential predators when they approach something other than an ungulate, like a human being, and that's the broken wing display. The bird will fly off the nest and act like it has a broken wing, beating one wing against the ground, dragging its tail feathers, which incidentally wears these tail feathers down a lot during the breeding season. And it shows this bright rusty color on the back. Of course, spring is a time we can observe some other sort of colorful behavior, such as mating. And this is a pair of killdeer on their territory. And the male steps up onto the female's back, treads up and down on her back, and then she drops her wings and allows him to slip off the side. And the contact between her cloaca and his cloaca is just seconds long as the male steps off. The European starling is a bird that I came to know about 65 years ago. It's a little over 65 years ago. And I was delivering the Des Moines Register at the time. And it was a snowy winter day. And as I approached a box into which I put newspapers that were for sale, I noticed this bird sitting on the box, and I got close enough I could see it. And I thought it was the most beautiful bird I had ever seen. And I even wrote a poem about it. They say that beauty is only skin deep, but surely the bird on that snowy morning atop the newspaper stand across the street was wonderful, elegant, stunning. Black tones touched with iridescent green, white spots accented its attire. Or were they snowflakes that dotted the sheen? Narrow pointed feathers, fingers of black fire, bristled from its neck and breast. What was this magical bird so fancifully dressed? Surely the bird of a poet. I knew I had to know it. Well, I did get to know it. And we still have them with us. And they are breeding right now. Some of them have young that are out of the nest already. They lose their spots by wear, not by molting. And when the spots wear off, it leaves this really iridescent, shiny plumage that it has during the breeding season. And during the breeding season, you can identify the male from the female because the male has blue at the base of the bill, and the female has pink at the base of the bill. And this is the male displaying. You can also identify the male because he has long, very narrow feathers on his chest, and he sticks those out on his throat and chest when he's displaying. And they usually display near the nest from the same spot again and again. This is a palm frond, and look at all of the uric acid, the excrement that has accumulated here as a result of his displaying there. Because of size, foods, and habitats, birds show a diversity of stages in chick development. Young chicks, when they hatch, can be altricial, which means the bird can have a short incubation period, something like a bluebird with an incubation period of about 2 weeks, or a woodpecker that has an incubation period of about 12 days. They can be semi-precocial with a long incubation period, usually an incubation period of 20 to 25 days, or they can be precocial with a very long incubation period, such as an incubation period of nearly a month. And the size of the eggs, altricial birds usually are birds that are small and have tiny eggs that just can't hold much in them. Semi-precocial and precocial have bigger eggs, and the biggest eggs, like chicken eggs and ostrich eggs, both of which are precocial, have very long incubation periods. Redheaded woodpeckers are birds that I've studied for many years, and they're interesting because, unlike other woodpeckers, there are no differences in appearance of the sexes. Yet there are great differences between adults and juveniles. And you have to ask the question, why? And the answer is simple. Redheaded woodpeckers, the adult over here, are birds that are primarily flycatchers. They will perch out in the open. They'll fly out to catch flying insects, or they'll fly to the ground to catch an insect, like a kestrel would fly to the ground to catch its prey. They are not particularly good at excavating because their bill is broader and used more to catch their food. And so they have a hard time finding a suitable place for a nest site, and very often will steal a nest site. And therein lies the answer to why the male and the female both have red on the head. First of all, take a look at the juvenile. It's got a brown plumage and has no red whatsoever on it. And that too is important. And the young red-headed woodpecker won't start getting red on the head until December of the year in which it hatches, or maybe sometimes even in January. It takes a while for them to mature and get that adult plumage. And there's reasoning for that too. Red in woodpeckers is a color that signifies male, and it also signifies dominance. The more red, the more dominant a bird is. And so they can be very aggressive. Sometimes, most woodpeckers can be, and you don't want to have red on you if you are competing with males, or if you don't want to compete with males or adult males. Territoriality in birds is usually male against male and female against female. After all, why would a male want to chase away a female? Or why would a female want to chase away a male? With both sexes of redheadeds having a lot of red, female red-bellied woodpeckers think that both are males. And the female red-bellied welcomes them in. Thus, redheads easily steal a red-bellied nest cavity because it's always a fight that is one male red-bellied against the red-headed pair. 2 against 1 always wins. About a little over 50 years ago, I studied red-headed woodpeckers in eastern Kansas, and I found a nest in which red-headed woodpeckers were just beginning to excavate the nest cavity. It was a rotted tree and they could excavate, and there was a crack down the middle that they could use as a starting point, and that's what usually happens when they excavate. And I thought, I'm going to study these birds. I want to see what happens inside the nest. So day after day, I would spend 10 minutes at this site as they were excavating, building this blind. And fortunately, the birds continued to excavate as I continued to build a blind. I put up a little tent on the back side. I cut a hole in the back, and I was able to put up a piece of pane of glass in between me and the inside of the nest, and the bird would come in and sit on the eggs while I was sitting in the blind, and I took this photograph. These are hatchling red-headed woodpeckers. As you can see, they are altricial young. naked and helpless. They don't have any down. They don't have any feathers at all when they hatch. Note that they have eyes that are closed and they remain closed for about 7 days. They also have a very large white egg tooth on the upper bill and a white egg tooth on the lower bill, which is unusual. The egg tooth that is used to break out of the shell is right here at the very tip. You can see a little point there. And you can see that they also have a swollen edge to the mouth right at the gape. And that is also shiny white. That's called an oral flange. And if you could see it, the tip of the tongue is also white. So when the baby birds raise their head up, it's dark in there. When the parent sticks its head in, there's not much light at all getting in, yet the adult bird can see 5 spots of white: the upper egg tooth, the lower egg tooth, and the right and left oral flange, and then a 5th dot of white in the center. And they aim for that dotted white in the center to put the food in the bird's mouth. And that enables them to get the food. The chick can't see the adult. It can tell when the bird comes in though, because the eyelid is translucent and it lets in light, but not vision. And so the key for the young to beg is when the cavity goes from a little bit of light to darkness, and then the young beg and they stick their neck up like this. And they always have their bodies up against one another in the bottom, as long as they don't have feathers, and that helps to keep them warm. Late spring and summer provide a continual parade of birds in transition as fledglings. That's one of the means of the diversity of color and form that we have, and why spring is such a wonderful time to bird. This was a photo taken by my son, Jerry Jr. up in Baltimore, of a great horned owl chick. And you can see even the chicks have ears that stick up. This is a great horned owl that paid a visit to our backyard this spring. And it is a fledgling. And this is an adult. This is a photo by Rod Wiley. This one is a photo I took. And the young chick is one my son took. They are semi-precocial, meaning that they can't leave the nest right away and they depend on the parents to provide them with food. Other birds that are truly precocial, such as the common gallinule, and Art took some wonderful pictures of common gallinules too. These young, as soon as they hatch, get in the water, can swim, and they follow the parents around, and the parents still feed them. Other precocial young, such as ducks, the parent only leads them to food and they have to feed themselves. And that's true of a killdeer also. Here are mottled duck young that I took a couple weeks ago. And you can see the female stands guard and keeps the chicks right against the shore, safe from potential predators. And the young are feeding themselves along the shore. You might see ducklings following their parent, as these ducklings are, and typically when they're going someplace, like to get away from somebody or going from one side of a pond or stream to another, the ducklings will fall in line and swim behind very closely. What you can't see is that as they swim, they are swimming synchronously, as if one of them was saying, right foot forward, left foot forward, right foot forward. They are the ultimate in synchronous swimmers. And that keeps them together and keeps them from having a jerky motion, so that this train of ducklings and mother is a smoothly moving individual or joint entity. So that it looks like it is all one animal, and it's not possible to distinguish the others, and it probably protects them from both the aerial predators and maybe also from predators from below. Snowy egrets are interesting because of one of the major differences between adults outside of the breeding season and during the breeding season is that during the breeding season, the yellow turns a bit orange. It's much deeper on the feet and on the face, and the legs are solid black in front and back. Whereas outside of the breeding season, an adult has yellow on the back of the legs that is sort of a lemon yellow, and lemon yellow feet and lemon yellow on the face. It's easy to overlook, but the differences are there. You can also see the egrets, the filamentous feathers that were so valuable that sold for the price of gold in the early 1900s, for which the conservation effort was born and the National Audubon Society was born. The snowy egret had the most valuable plumes, although great egrets were also being killed by the thousands, and the great egret was adopted as the symbol for the National Audubon Society. Why are so many waders white, like snowy egrets? Here are some more snowy egrets, and this is not a photoshopped photo. These are 4 individual birds, and they are fishing on the wing. And they will go out, find a fish that are near the surface. They put their feet down in the water as this bird is doing, use the feet to stabilize their position and as a rudder, and hold their wings out as this second bird is doing in order to be able to put their head down and grab the fish that's out in front as this bird has done. And the whiteness is what keeps them together, attracts one another. Easy meals are hard to come by, and food is very patchy. It's not evenly distributed. So finding food is socially facilitated. That means that the birds help one another. Spotting other white birds in the open is easy, and they are a lone white bird will spot a group of white birds and go to them, even if they're of a different species. And there is also the adage that there's safety in numbers, but it might also be food is abundant there, which is why they go. This is a photo that isn't in the best of focus, but you can see the first birds are. There's snowy egrets, and there's also great egrets in the background. And these were all gathered because there were several Florida gar in here that were chasing schools of young fish that had hatched, and they were chasing them into the shallows where the gar could catch them easily. And these birds were attracted and they were catching them too. And so when you see egrets, ibises, and storks all lined up like this, it's because of social facilitation and a relative abundance of food that's concentrated there. The white ibis is another white bird that also is found with the herons and egrets, but the juveniles are different. When they hatch and begin to grow up, when they leave the nest, and they have a brownish color and a dark color and sort of grayish legs, and they remain that way for more than a year. You can see a lot right now that are last year's birds still will look like this. As they finally mature in their second year, they become solid white, and their head and bill are sort of reddish, but they're not really bright. But during the breeding season, they develop a heavy gular sac like this and like this over here, and their feathers, the face becomes very bright red. And note that they too have beautiful blue eyes. And one of the interesting things about the blue eyes in this bird and also in the anhingas is that there is no blue pigment in birds. The color blue is a result of the color, the pigment melanin, the black pigment in the eye, and it's the arrangement of the melanin that scatters the light and reflects only blue light. But if you were to look at this out of the light and out of direct light, you could see that it's black. The tricolored heron as adults has some very different appearances. Outside of the breeding season, tricolored heron has yellow legs, a yellow bill with some black on top of the bill. And during the breeding season, the adult develops this crest that is a long and pointed crest that hangs down the back. And it develops a much darker bill tip and a bright blue bill and maroon legs. This is unusual, this great a change in leg and bill color, but is characteristic of the tricolored heron. Tricolored heron juveniles, on the other hand, begin life with a purplish brown neck and head with purple on the wings also. And over the course of a year, that gradually changes so that here's a little bit of purple left on the neck and a little bit of purple left here. But you can see this one is almost in the non-breeding color of an adult, but it still has more black on the bill and a little black mark that's right here in both of these birds. You can see all of those plumages right now out at places like Eagle Lakes or some other area where where tricolored herons are. Corkscrew has them like that. The little blue heron is more common in some places, and it has very different plumage as a juvenile. The young little blue heron is totally white. This is one that is beginning to molt into the bluish gray color of an adult. And at this stage, these are often called a calico heron. And you can see calico herons right now. It can take over a year for the white little blue that emerges during its hatching year to the time it becomes like these adult little blues. It will probably be September before this bird looks like this bird. Yet the breeding season, notice that first of all, that the leg color is a greenish gray color, and the calico, it's a greenish gray color in the non-breeding adult, but it begins to turn black and with a blue base in the breeding season adult, as it is here. And note it, like the tricolored heron, has a bright blue bill with a black tip. It's a thicker bill and a shorter bill than the tricolored heron has. And the little blue heron never has a white belly and as adults. At my feeder this winter, we had chipping sparrows, lots of chipping sparrows, and we got to watch them as they made the transition from winter plumage, which has a lot of striping on the head and not as much distinction in the markings on it. The breast color was different here. These are new feathers coming in here that are giving it a lighter color. And here are some that are closer. This was the 1st of March. This is 2 weeks later that we see. The cap is almost solid rusty, and the breast is a nice clear light gray color. And this is the point at which they left to migrate north to breeding areas. And this is another bird that we get at our feeder, and they're very common in Florida, the palm warbler. And it is a migrant that breeds in the boreal forests of Canada and winters in Florida and other areas of the Southeast. It was described for science by John James Audubon from a Florida bird that he saw under a palm tree in Florida, and that's how it got its name, palm warbler. It's got a sort of a dull yellow color on its rump and under its tail. and it's sort of a grayish color when it arrives, and then gradually develops more of a yellow eye line, rust on top of its head, and a little more yellow on the breast. And we have two races that show up here, one that stays white and one that develops quite yellow. But these are birds that I photographed here in January, February, and in April, just before they left. And this is the last bird that I've got, the brown pelican. I thought we ought to have at least one bird from the coast. And we all know juvenile brown pelicans, and they last a long time, sometimes 3 years in this plumage, which is sort of dull. It's because they have a lot to learn, and they're very clumsy as young birds. And they depend a lot on the parents teaching them how to fish and how to catch fish. I've seen young brown pelicans lay down right at the water's edge and lay on their side, stretch their neck out into the water to have their bill at the side to try to catch fishes that are little tiny fishes that are in an inch of water there. But they learn and they perfect it. Brown pelicans don't have differences between the sexes in their plumage, but they do have seasonal differences. And it's a difference that's easy to remember. The winter plumage has snow on the back of its head. So it's got this white back of the head, whereas the snow melts in spring and it comes into the breeding plumage and you can see the brown bare ground here. Eye color also changes and bill color changes as the birds mature. I got a lucky series of photos, and I'm going to end with one of a juvenile brown pelican that was trying to catch some food. And they catch their food by plunge diving. The pouch that they have, this one has something in its pouch that it's caught. And you can see that it's quite flexible. And when they hit the water, it opens up. The bones are flexible in the lower jaw so that they bow out. It's like opening an umbrella almost. And then they come back in and close up again. But here is a juvenile brown pelican that dove into the water, and it was backlit. So you can see the sun coming through the thin wall of the brown pelican's pouch. And you can see the blood vessels that nourish that coming down from above where the major artery is and spreading out like branches of a tree. And at the same time, you can see how the muscle is like a fan. There are lines in the muscles here that fold up as the bill is closed. And when a pelican dives into the water and that bill is opened up by the force of the water and serves as a net to capture the birds, when the pelican comes up with its mouth full, the first thing it has to do is to get rid of the water, and the bones of the lower bill come back together, water goes over the edge, and it has to get rid of the rest of the water, so it may flick it up. And in this case, it flicked up a fish. And now it's trying to catch that little fish. And by gosh, it got it. There's the little fish down here, silhouetted against the lining of the mouth. So this is a little bit unusual, but it's a bit of really interesting color, the color of spring. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jerry. We always learn so many new things from you. Thank you for all your studies and observations and for sharing it with us all.
Well, I could have done this with all totally different birds. It would be a different program, but it would still, there's so much to see out there right now. And it's just a good time to find a place that you can go and social distance and just wander or sit on a bench by yourself and watch birds. And the key is staying still and watching. Be a bird watcher.
Yes, that is key. Thank you, Jerry. We do have a few questions from the participants. So I'll just read some of them off for you. One question referred to what you talked about in the beginning. Besides the cedar waxwing, do other birds have powder down?
Yes, and I didn't mention it, but I did mention that herons and egrets have powder downs, but most birds have powder downs, and they're scattered through their feathers. Some birds, like cedar waxwings, have a lot of them. There are some parrots that have a lot of them. They get this satiny appearance. So if you see a bird that's got this kind of satiny appearance, it's because of powder downs. But in the case of herons and egrets, the powder downs are found in actually three concentrations. There's two patches together as one patch right at the center of their breast, and there are two separate patches, one on each flank. And throughout the day, a heron or egret will reach into the powder downs and grab a bill full of powder downs. And they just come off, they crumble, and they rub those powder downs on their feathers. It's like a lady at the turn of the century or whenever powdering her face to get rid of a shiny nose or something. Maybe people still do it. I don't know. I've never done that, but they do it on television. They powder their face to reduce the shine. Well, that's why herons and egrets do it, to reduce the shine. But at the same time, all of that powder on all of the other feathers that's put there by the birds serves as a Teflon coat so that mud and water just roll off the feathers. And that's how white birds stay so white out in a muddy, mucky environment.
Wow. Okay, Jerry, there's quite a few questions coming in now. Another one was, redheaded woodpeckers are observed to be feeding from backyard feeders this time of the year. Would they also be eating seeds in the wild to supplement available food for chicks?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that. But the backyard feeder and seeds, do they get?
The redheaded woodpecker are eating from backyard feeders right now.
Yes.
What do they get in the wild for their chicks?
It's fast food. They are probably nesting right now. They need as much energy as they can get. They need as much fat as they can get, and they get it from they can get a lot of food from the seed. They need protein for their young, so they're not going to be feeding the seeds to their young. They're going to be feeding insects, but they will come to the feeder because it's a ready source and they know they can get a lot of it. We have red-bellied woodpeckers doing that right now, and they will also come to a mixture of peanut butter and cornmeal that you can just spread on the bark of a tree, and they'll come to that. Or you can take a dead branch that's about 2 inches in diameter and drill half-inch or inch diameter holes into it and fill those holes with peanut butter cornmeal mixture, and they love that. And that's an even better source of food for them. Requires less energy for them to digest, but they have to feed their young as much protein as they can, so the insects are easier and better for them. But they will eventually bring their young to the feeder and teach them about the seeds too.
Okay, great. Another question, is there any interbreeding between birds like little blues and tricoloreds? Have you heard of that? Is there ever any interbreeding between birds?
Oh, is there any interbreeding between them? I don't know of any interbreeding between tricolored and little blue, but I do know that the snowy egret and tricolored, I think it's tricolored, will sometimes interbreed. There are a few hybrids that are known. It's not common, but they have occurred here in South Florida.
Okay.
No, it's little blue. Yeah, little blue and snowy, I think. Yeah,
Okay. All
but
right.
that occurs in nature. Usually the hybrids are infertile, so it doesn't continue, and the hybrids just disappear eventually.
Okay. Cool. Okay. Another question that just came in. What is the purpose of the gular sac on the ibis?
What is the purpose of the gular sac?
Yes.
The female, interestingly, the female seems to have the larger gular sac. And those things like that, the color and the size of structures like the gular sac, can be used as a signal of indicating or suggesting the health of the bird and the ability of that potential ability of that bird to be a good parent. It's not used for carrying food or anything like that I know of. It's only occurs during the breeding season. And the female white ibis has a display in which it uses that sac. And it seems to use it in the presence of males displaying, look at me, it's sort of like, I don't want to use examples, but it's a part of their anatomy that they sort of flaunt and use in a way to attract a male. They will throw their head back and forth over their back with that red showing very prominently, and that seems to attract the males.
Wow, cool. Okay, another question. You're getting quite a few of them, Jerry. One is most birds lose their toenail tooth as they mature. Why does the brown pelican keep its tooth?
Why does the brown pelican
keep its toenail tooth?
Keep its the tip of the bill, you mean?
The egg tooth, basically. Yeah, the tip of the bill.
That sharp point. Let's see if I can find that picture again. I'll show you. Okay. No, well, this would do also, I guess. Brown pelicans have it too. Let's see if we can go to the brown pelican. Okay, this structure right here.
Yes, I believe that's what he's talking about.
That's just the tip of the bill, and it hangs down over the lower bill. You can see the lower bill has a little indentation right here at the tip, so this will come down and protect it. And it's very, very hard, and so the rest of the bill is relatively soft. And this is the hardest point. It's called nail, N-A-I-L, and the nail, it's like a fingernail, and it protects the tip of the bill from wear. And a brown pelican is a plunge diver. It may see a fish in relatively shallow water and dive in, and it might hit the sandy bottom, and it might injure the bill if it didn't have that. So it has a function. It's like the nails serve a function of protecting the tips of your fingers.
Cool. Okay, a couple more questions we have time for. How old are night heron chicks when they leave the nest?
I don't know.
All right.
Probably, I would guess they were about a month old, maybe a month to 4 weeks.
Okay.
They stay, well, they will branch. They will get out of the nest and will walk along a branch, but they're not fully fledged probably for a month or so.
Okay.
And they are semi-precocial. So
Oh, wow.
the parents have to feed them, and yeah.
Okay. Another question someone had was, what type of seed do you use in your feeders?
Well, I get a mixture, a mixed seed mix, and you can get it at Ace Hardware. You can get it at Costco. You can get it at I think you can get it at Sam's, or you can certainly get it at Walmart. Pennington is a good brand, but you want to make sure that it doesn't have a lot of corn in it, or a lot of sorghum seed, because those are of less value for the birds and will be more attractive to rodents. But the sunflower seeds are the favored for cardinals. If you want cardinals, just put out sunflower seeds. But if you want a mixture of birds, then you need to have seeds of different sizes and different types.
Okay, great, good information. Thank you, Jerry.
And no matter what you put out, the squirrels are going to be there.
That's one thing that's for sure.
Yeah.
All right, and we have one more comment. Someone said that they enjoyed your beautiful poem of the European Starling, and thanks for sharing. It was a new bird for them.
I'm sorry?
They enjoyed your poem of the European.
I love bird poetry, and I do a lot of writing. I've been putting together an anthology of bird poetry and also working on a collection of my own. But when I ever get that done, I don't know. It's one of those things on the burner that every once in a while I go to and work on. I even have a title for the book. It's the Birds of Poets, the Poetry of Birds.
Very cool.
That's the anthology.
That's great. Well, thank you so much, Jerry, for your wonderful presentation, and thank everyone for joining us today.
It's been a new experience.
Yes, for all of us, I think. Yeah. Well, thank you, everyone, and we hope to see you again whenever we schedule another one of these presentations, which hopefully will be next month. All right, I think we're out of time, so we'll see you next time, and thank you again, Jerry.
You're welcome. Bye.
Bye.